Welcome to Heart Change You live stream. It's our goal to be relevant and allow us the opportunity to speak in, but also allow you to have questions here. That's why we're doing a live stream format, so we get together. I'd like to announce a programming change that we're going to make. On Tuesdays through the summer, we're doing our best to feature other ministries, things that are going on. We're trying to come alongside, and we do have some of that happening today. And in addition to that, we want to stay with the other format that we've had. So we're adding a Friday live stream, 12:30 to 1:30, where we're going to stay more with the series, content, issue type of things that are a little bit more intensive than we've been having. So we have a programming change. We hope that you'll join us. Again, send us questions. Give us a chance to interact with you. I really feel like that's where I'm at my best, or we're at our best, is just being spontaneous and answering the kinds of questions that are important to everyone. And so today we have Kimberly with us.
Yes.
You've been my regular. You've been hanging in there.
I'm here, and I guess I'll be here on Fridays too.
You guess you'll be here on Fridays?
Well, I will be.
Oh, you will be.
And is that starting this Friday for the viewers?
Why not?
Okay. That's what I wanted to make sure they knew.
We have to be flexible, but
okay.
let's jump in. And today, Priscilla, it's so good to have you with us. We've enjoyed you, and your husband Jacob have been with us at I think it's just one of the retreats that we've done. I believe you came and helped out with worship and helped out with one of the intensive retreats that we did, and that was amazing to have you guys there. And obviously, you guys have come and been a part of what we do from time to time on our Friday nights with our Omega gatherings. And so we want to say a thank you. First of all, you're amazing. You go the extra mile to help out, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. I'm really excited.
We actually are going to feature you initially in terms of, or maybe not you, but maybe the church or maybe whatever, but an event. Today we're actually building the topic around leadership to some extent because of the event that you'll be talking about. But I think I'll let you just jump in and share about the Leadership Summit.
Yeah, so I'm from Revolution Church, and we launched just about 3 years ago, right before the pandemic started. But something that I've been super passionate about since we started, since I was actually a lot younger, is something called Global Leadership Summit. And I've been attending since probably like middle school, high school. My parents would go, the church there would host it. And I can say for a fact that it was something that just really completely changed the way that I looked at leadership, whether in the context of church or as a student, in school, or just anything. I just looked at leadership differently. So when I got the opportunity to be a part of a church that I would get to start scheduling things, I was like, okay, Global Leadership Summit, that's going to be something that we do. So Revolution will be hosting that this year again for the third year, and this time fully in person, but it is a live simulcast. So we just have everyone come together so that we can all watch the big screen, which we just got a newer LED screen. So it's going to be hopefully bigger and better this year for viewing preferences. But yeah, it's a really great leadership opportunity, really to preface a leader, if they're in a position of leadership in a church and organization, or they're just looking at a way to grow in the way that they interact with people in their everyday lives. Because you can be a leader within your own home. You can be a leader whether or not your title says you have people that you oversee. Really, it's working with people on a regular basis. These are the skills and the things that they're going to talk about. So that's August 3rd and 4th, full days, starting I think it's about 9 o'clock, ending 5 o'clock, both days. Really packed, and it can be a lot, but there's lots of space to just really get to reflect. And the whole point, the thing that I love that as Revolution gets to host it, is that we're creating the space then for people to network. We're creating a space for churches to be together, for different organizations in town to be together, really creating that little bit of a bridge. Like, okay, I know we may not see each other on a regular basis throughout the whole year, but here's a space that I want you to be together to talk about the things. Because you're going to realize, like, a lot of the leaders struggle with some of the same things, especially post-pandemic. So this is just one of those opportunities that I love to create for the leaders and different people in the community.
Do people just show up? Is there a registration?
There is a registration, and I'm not going to say prices because it really depends on who you are. There is a range from $99 to $230, but there's sponsorships, there's scholarships, there's all sorts of ways. Again, it just depends on who you are and what kind of discount you get. But you can look at all of that information on our website, revolutionfmc.com/events. And it'll take you through that, and you'll see all the different options for that.
Okay. So that's the best way is connect with your website. It'll funnel you to that particular point. You'll find out what your price is.
Yes.
And then you'll be able to go from there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Anything else you want to say about that event?
I just really can't preface the fact that it's not just for people who are in a super high position. Like I said, I was doing it since I was in high school, and it's something that just really changed the way that I look at what it looks like to be involved with people.
I was actually going to jump on that, but you were on a roll, so I let you keep going.
Thank you.
But
I lose my thought easily, so thank you.
You're like, okay, I'm going for this. But you talked about how it changed your view of leadership and the impact that it had on you. Talk to us about that. Explain what impact did it have? What, if you can nail it down to one idea or something, what impact did it actually have?
I think it really, for me, was a big deal to recognize that whether you're in the secular world, in secular business, whatever, a nonprofit, a church, you're working with people, and everyone has something that they can teach you. Everyone has something that they can learn from each other. Again, whether it's going to be super churchy language or it's going to be super corporate world language, it all comes down to working with people. And that was a huge thing for me to learn because I did grow up as a pastor. I'm a pastor's kid, and a lot of my world was church and that nonprofit idea and language. And that easily could have been the only tunnel that I looked through, the only lens that I saw. But it didn't. With that opportunity to see all these other leaders that totally different areas, I could still glean different insights. I could still see, okay, well, in the church context, the language is a little different, but this is how I could apply it in this way. Or in the corporate world, because the speakers are also going to be from all over spectrum, church leaders, corporate leaders, just anybody, anything could happen with the leaders. So to see those different people be able to teach me, oh, I can do this too. Again, at the young age that I was, but even in attendance, the people that were older than me still being able to realize we all have the same capacities. We all have some of those same abilities if we would just allow ourselves, right, to, humble ourselves a little bit and say, okay, yeah, I can also learn this and do this in my context.
To me, it's interesting in churches. I see two trends. Trends number one almost separates leadership from spirituality. So if I'm going to be spiritual, I'm going to pray, I'm going to hear from God, or whatever language that they would use. And so all of that is worldly, and it's something that I don't want to be a part of. What I've also seen over the last 30 years, and it really started, I believe, somewhat in what was frequently called the seeker-sensitive movement, et cetera, where I feel like some churches have turned church into nothing but a science, and at some point prayer gets de-emphasized, leadership gets brought up, and so I've seen both extremes at work in churches where many times they're just ignoring, and at other times they're almost ignoring God for the sake of the leadership techniques. Any reaction to that in terms of the summit itself or not?
I can't praise them enough. They really do a very good job at keeping it right in the middle. Because you invite just about anyone, right? Anyone can come, whether they're a churchgoer or not. It is started by a pastor, and it is faith founded, and all of those pieces, but they keep it still very general. Like, okay, this is maybe something I glean from because I have a relationship with Jesus, and this is why I think the way that I think. But this is how you can apply it to both of those places. And then vice versa. Okay, like, yes, I maybe have a faith, but I don't apply it necessarily church language or whatever. But this is what to me a good leader looks like. And I think it really just has to come down, though they do it super well, it's going to come down to the way we think. Are we willing to see that as a both and? Because, it's actually really funny because I just got to preach on leadership, the leadership of Jesus, just a couple weeks ago. And I'm starting my master's program. I just started last week doing my master's of divinity. So started seminary. And my very first class is called biblical leadership. So I was like, okay, God, I'm still in the learning process, I guess is what I should say. But the real big difference here is leadership is leadership. It's, are we involving God, and is he the one we're following in that process, is the real big deal and the big difference when you go into settings like that.
And just because I can, you have a special date coming up here very shortly.
Yes, yes, I do.
Do you want to say, or do we just keep going? I mean, if you don't want me to say anything, we can keep going.
No, it's okay. I'm still getting used to attention. I don't like the spotlight on me. I really don't. But I actually just in two Saturdays from now, I will be getting ordained as an elder in the Free Methodist Church. And I'm really excited for that opportunity, not just because I know it's what God has called me to do, and it's not because, again, it's not the title, it's not that I'm looking for, but it's really special because I'm third generation in ministry. My grandpa, my mom, and my dad both, and really getting to watch my mom step into that role of leadership in that capacity is really what inspired me. Like, I can do this, and this is going to be really cool. And again, not looking for a title, not looking for a special event for the attention, but really a confirmation to the people, like, hey guys, this is what God has called me to do, and I'm excited to share that, and I'm excited to participate in this way with really just getting to share the good news in a different context. Like, it's really exciting.
I think it's wonderful that God knew way in advance what he was going to do with your life and how you were drawn to this summit leadership type conferences when you were just a young girl. Yeah. And so it was starting to happen what God's doing now. And now look, because you respect, I see that you respect, and that's why you like the summit leadership. You respect all people, and you know that anyone can be taught and lead. And so you've kind of moved forward with that, and that's why you're going to be a great elder, is because you don't see it as any better position than anyone else. The other thing that I think is interesting that you said about the summit and that everybody's there is that, I'm not going to mention any famous businessmen in the world, but one of the things that they claim is that the inability not to listen to other people's ideas or their knowing something, that stops success. And when you're willing to listen to other people and not put them as secondary, I'm thinking of, the notes that we had for today, ego, pride comes in when you think you have better ideas and you're a know-it-all, and that there's no one else that could have anything that can help or benefit your ministry or your business or whatever it is. So what I hear you saying is this place kind of sets the stage for that to happen for people. And I guess one of my prayers would be that when people go there, that they open up a little bit and they're willing to listen and not be so closed up about my ideas are the only ideas that work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We were headed into leadership, and Charlotte happened to hand me this book, Henry Nouwen, in terms of, it's called In the Name of Jesus, which you're kind of like, okay, where does that go? But the subtitle is Reflections on Christian Leadership. So I just happened to have that. And So I did bring that today just as kind of a jump start for some of what we talk about. And it's kind of interesting because obviously it was written enough years ago that, 1989, enough years ago, they were asking him to look forward to the 21st century and say, okay, what's going to happen then? Well, we are forward. We are living there. But I want to start with his first chapter title, which is The Temptation. And he says the temptation is to be relevant. And I find that kind of interesting, just some of the topics that he starts with. You know, as we're thinking about moving forward, and I think about that a lot in the current culture with the woke pressures and with everything else. I mean, you literally have our normal cultural norms being turned inside out, upside down. You can't say that, you can't do that, you know, all of the different pressures. I've really struggled. What do I say? How do I say it? Do we do video? You know, I mean, you know, all of the different questions. And a lot of that comes back to this relevancy idea. You know, how do you be relevant? How do you be impactful? How do you be influential? So let's just start with that question, and I'll give a quick 2 cents in terms of that. What I've been talking about, especially today, woke culture, everything turning upside down. I think the one thing God has spoken to me is stop defending, stop arguing, stop, etc. In other words, just be you, be real, make real presentations. Don't argue against, be for. And so to me, when he's talking about the temptation to relevance, a lot of times we want to be culturally significant, culturally relevant, culturally up to date. I would almost suggest people who try too hard in that area actually miss the point that he's making here, the temptation to be relevant in a way. Let's go back to what I said, the two forms. You have one that gets so spiritually minded that they're no earthly good, so to speak. Okay, you've got these different things. But I really feel like part of leadership is figuring out who you are, who God called you to be, and learning to rest in that particular place.
Yeah, I think that we can look at other people in different roles and we can start to admire them because of what we think their position is. And we can be tempted to be swayed to try to be more like them, minister like them, do what they're doing instead of what God has actually called us to do. And I found that I can tell now where I'm comfortable more than I could have before, because I was trying to fit what everybody else wanted me to fit into, or this mold or this idea that they have. And I think we kind of talked about that a little bit last week with Jackie, you know, that it's very hard. She's taken the step out, you know, from the church and doing these conferences now. And so that's the same thing the Lord had told me to do when I'd been serving in the church for years. And I'm like, but this isn't the norm, you know. But I'm totally aware now, and why I'm doing this with you is I've always liked to talk, you know, and people would tell me to shut up, you know, and I'd be like, but I like to talk. And so since I've been doing this and how the doors are opening for more like the Friday, I feel so comfortable, and I know that it's my place and my way to minister to people.
What's interesting, you were actually talking before we went on about because of this show, because of things that are being shared, it's actually opening more doors for you to speak to people.
Yes, it really is, because even after the show last week, even if they didn't respond on, you know, our live stream here, I'm getting texts and phone calls on my own Facebook and saying, oh my gosh, that spoke to me. You have no idea. Telling me, thank you, Kim, for being obedient to God, and doing what he's called you to do, because I've struggled with this. And thank you for being open and honest and talking about it. So Was it easy initially?
Mm.
But you know, the more I open up about it, and don't worry about what other people think about me, or about what my life had been before, the more freedom I'm getting every day, all the time,
Mm.
all the time.
I love that. It's interesting because also in my journey that of course I'm still on in learning, it took me, so I've already gotten to preach every few months, usually whenever Pastor Steve is gone or just whatever that might look like. But it took me probably a year and a half before I recognized that I was trying to be Pastor Steve. I was trying to preach like he did. I was trying to do my notes and my slides and like the whole thing. And so I was like, okay, wait a second. Why am I doing it the way I'm doing it? It's not necessarily like it's working, like it's okay, but this isn't me. And it was the same having to recognize, okay, I'm me, but then a lot of my life I attached myself to, I'm the pastor's kid. So I need to look a certain way or do a certain thing for the sake of my dad or my mom and the image that they carry. And, you know, fighting that back and forth and then still having to fight that after, like, okay, I don't have to look like Pastor Steve. I don't have to look like my parents. I don't have to look like anyone. Like, I literally just have to come as myself. And even the opportunities you say you have that people come to you afterwards, most of the time that wouldn't happen for me unless it was me coming from who I was and from my own struggles and the way that worked for me, that then it was like, oh, these opportunities are so much sweeter and greater because I was authentically me. I was able to put aside whoever I was trying to be like. I mean, even in the way we look at to kind of trying to be relevant, right? Trying to be somebody else or something else or fit this mold that has been created. Well, you can go the extreme of I don't want people to look at me. I want people to just see Jesus, like, or whatever end goal is, right?
And every time you say that, they're looking at you. But
Exactly.
never mind.
Exactly. But also the getting so caught up in like, I want them to look like, or I want them to see Jesus. I want them to see Jesus. And then take the human nature and the human relationship outside of it. Or go to the other end. Well, I want them, maybe not intentionally, but yes, they want to look at Jesus, but mostly look at me and how am I reflecting Jesus or how am I? So it is really easy to get caught up in this idea of looking at you, but seeing Jesus. And that's a really hard thing to do well.
I'm going to go to the other end of the spectrum on that one. I enjoy working with pastors who are what I call trying to find their voice. And invariably, we've been taught, you know, you've got your 3-point sermon, you've got your PowerPoints, you've got whatever, and this is what works. So often pastors get into that shape, into that form, and it's just, it doesn't really fit who they are. It's not their voice. Now, I'll put you on the spot, and you're going to look at me and go, why did you do this? But have you found your voice? And if you've found your voice, in other words, you talked about, I'm not this, so what are you?
I'm still figuring that out, honestly. Like, it's, again, it's not like I get to do it every week. So something I might learn, I might forget by the next time or whatever. But right now I'm really noticing that I'm in the middle of being like super prepared and super like, no, you're reading a script and the going just off the cuff, which I would say you're probably more on like, you know, just gonna
I'm
do.
like, what? Like I would go off the cuff?
Yeah,
You would dare to suggest that?
Yes, I would, because you are. And so I'm finding I'm in the middle. If I'm super duper prepared, it's usually still not going to go that great, because then I'm anxious about the fact, like, I miss all the little details.
Well, let me ask, and again, I hate to do this live and in public,
let's do
but
it.
hey, you exposed yourself to it, so we're going to go there.
You're right.
Think about with people. If
Okay.
you're just hanging out with a person, and the topic is leadership, so you're just hanging out with a person, when the real you comes out in a way that it's like you walk away from that and it's like, that was kind of fun. You know, I enjoyed that. I felt like there was some chemistry there. Who are you when that happens?
I'm a listener. I'm listening. I want to like the whole phrase that may be overused, I don't know, the meeting people where they're at, for me is so much more of listening. I don't want to respond. I don't want to create a scenario if it's not going to apply to you. So where are you at in your ministry? Where are you at in your leadership? Let's talk about that and find the different places that we connect, or that I can maybe help speak life into, or maybe vice versa. It's like, oh, you figured that out, then help me because I don't know how to do that yet.
Which is interesting because in the sermon that I heard you preach, what did you do? You surveyed the people. You listened. And so as a part of your presentation, you did a survey. You were listening. You were responding to what they said. So it's kind of interesting to me. You don't think of that as fitting within a sermon preaching style, but you managed to incorporate that into your style.
And I'll say even a little extra step that most people didn't know. I had completely written a different sermon like by Thursday. Like Thursday night, I had thought I was completely done. I was ready to go. And I shared it with a friend that's really close to me, I trust. And really, I was just like, okay, I feel like this is good, but can you just look through it? Can you make isure it reads well? Is this going to make sense if this is the point I'm trying to make? And she was really honest, and she's like, no, like, this isn't, I hear what you're trying to say, but this is not what you're saying. And so I had another 24 hours of like completely resetting, because I take Sabbath on Saturday, so I don't work. So I was like, I have 24 hours to really figure out, okay, God, you told me to ask her, like, I trusted her, and you're saying this needs to be changed. I'll be honest, I had a little bit of a freak out for my personal self, like, well, shoot, I did it wrong. But really it was, I reached out, I asked for feedback first. I want to make sure that the people who are going to hear are going to understand it in a way that relates to them. And that's what I was missing. I was missing that piece of, this is authentically me. I was trying to be, I was trying to bring this like perfect presentation of leaders. And my friend's like, but you're one of them, and this is where you're at, and this is where you're struggling, and that's okay. So it really took me being able to be vulnerable and not necessarily survey, but really come back to a conversation and be like, okay, this is where I'm at, and that's going to be okay.
I think this is incredibly powerful in terms of leadership in general. Obviously, we're talking with you about incorporating it into a sermon. But leadership in general is just this finding your voice, finding your place, being authentic. Anytime that you adjust, and again, it's like I'm being bombarded with two thoughts at the same time. I mean, on the one hand, you can take what I'm getting ready to say and take it so far that you don't listen, you don't see people, you don't hear people, and so that's bad leadership. But on the other hand, God has created you who you are, and there's a level that you have to have integrity in that. You've got to have authenticity. And a lot of times, for the sake of being relevant, for the sake of being impactful, I'm going to come over here and do this way, which is, frankly, it's one of my criticisms, I think, of what I see happening in leadership today in churches. It really has become cookie cutter. I mean, when you look across at many of the leadership principles are being taught at a level of technique to where you walk into church after church, if they're in the quote unquote leadership circle, they're all doing church almost exactly the same way.
Yep.
Oh, maybe we end up with a voice authenticity issue at that point. You know, maybe we need to, instead of being inside of cookie cutter that fits a certain kind of a thing, maybe we need to step back and say, who am I as a church? Who are we as a church? Who am I as a pastor, et cetera? And we have more authenticity.
Well, that goes right into the little note I made after you commented. So for so many years, I was going to some churches, and certain things, gifts were being displayed from me, and people would literally in the church come up and say, oh, you're just like this person, this evangelist, this famous, this person. And they would say that to me. And then I would hear, oh, I would read the Bible, and for some reason, I would characterize myself, or they'd say, oh, you're like David, you're like, so I had all these names being put into me. And I remember the day that I was praying, and I thanked God for creating me. And I literally, after I prayed it, I heard, who are you? And right out of my spirit, I said, I am Kimberly. And the minute I identified with myself and that I didn't have to be like someone else, everything started to change for me. It made me feel very loved by God, that he knew who I was. He made me a specific way for a certain reason for him, and I didn't have to be like everyone else or try to be. And I don't know, that day that I heard that, it just changed. And I think it was even before I started coming here and doing this with you. And I said, oh, I am Kimberly. You created me to be me, not somebody else or who somebody else says I am. And so that voice had to go away for me also about what people said I was or who I was.
Interesting. A second major point in the book is the temptation to be spectacular. So
There
it's,
you go.
not only do I have to be like someone, I have to be better than someone. I tend to put pressure on myself to be the knowledgeable guy, to be able to have the answers, to have the details, and it's actually been very frustrating to me as I'm aging. I can't pull Bible verses the way I used to. I mean, people used to would say, "Here, where's this? Tell me where it is." And I, with a high degree of frequency, I could say, "Well, that's da 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 da," and they'll do the same question now, and I'm like, Psalms, first part, 20-ish. I mean, you just, but that ability, I would say, to be spectacular, it's not there, and hopefully somewhere along the line, I've lost that need to be spectacular, because part of not just finding your voice, but learning to be what I would call in the moment. If you're trying to be spectacular, I'll go back to your sermon prep. There was a little bit of that. I'm new. I've got to make my mark. I've got to do this. I've got to do it right. And so you've got all of that anxiety and pressure hanging over you. And frankly, our culture does that because of entertainment and the videos and everything else that's so polished and so non-human, and et cetera. It points at us in a way that demands that we be spectacular. And I'm going to go back to the word authenticity in the church with people. Some of the best things you can do are that integrity, authenticity, I am me. It's kind of the same thing, part two, but resist the temptation to be spectacular.
Yeah. Well, and every time you're saying spectacular, the thing that's coming to my mind is how everyone's definition of spectacular is going to be different, right? Everyone's definition of what it looks like to be better. So I go back to the different titles that people struggle with, or different roles, really. So as a wife or a husband, as an addict, a non-addict, a recovering addict, a fill in the blank, a student. Like, I struggled for the longest time with the fact that my person was a student instead of that's something I'm in the middle of a journey. I'm a student right now. That doesn't define who I am. That's one of the biggest things you have to figure out first is, why are you trying to be spectacular? Because you're trying to meet this standard of whatever title you're fighting. It's not the fact, maybe there's a lot of pride in all of it, but how much of it is going to the heart of trying to figure out who you are because you thought you had to be X, Y, and Z because you have, okay, well, if I'm married, I'm a wife, so that means I have to do this, this, and that. I'm a student, I'm in this year, so I have to do this, this, and that. And then wanting to be the best student, the best wife, or the best definition of, fill in the blank. I think that's the biggest hurdle you have to jump first.
With the idea of leadership, a lot of times we do bring along this whole idea of excellence. And again, in general, I'm for excellence, but that that word excellence ties into this spectacular, to where I can't just get up and be me. I can't experience God in the moment. We've got to experience God at this high level. We can't just give an altar call. We've got to give an altar call on steroids, and we've got to have this unbelievable response. Never mind that at some point, if you've gone into levels of manipulation with that, there's a good chance that some of the responses that you got on your spectacular altar call may actually rebound in a way that's negative towards the kingdom of God. And in order to get results, in order to entertain, in order to whatever, we go for spectacular because it's results, and that means that I'm better. And I think in the kingdom of God, that's not necessarily a good approach.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm also thinking of just in my own life, even my own family, expecting me to show up and bring everybody else up. And when I started to heal from all of these wounds and these things that had happened to me, I can remember getting ready to go to a family function and just not wanting to go because I didn't feel spectacular. I'm at my lowest point. I can't go now because I can't do what they all want me to do for them. And so I wasn't going to go. And it was actually my husband that said, go. They need to see you the way you are. And what began to happen for me was I began to be able to minister in that place, not trying to be that spectacular person to be everything for all of them. And what began to happen is that I would cry a lot more. And like even when I'm ministering at church and I go with someone, I would be crying. And then I thought, oh, I shouldn't be doing that. That isn't the way it looks when I'm up here praying with people. Until a very dear lady in church came up to me and she said, Kim, your tears are anointed. When you are engaging with those people, nobody else is doing it, but I want you to know that you're ministering when you. So it was totally the opposite of what I thought it was going to be. And so now I'm not so afraid, I guess would be the word, to go up there and be authentic. And if no one else is holding the woman up at the altar and cry, so what? Somebody, that's what he's called me to do. Not everyone else either. So I've grown to appreciate, and I thank that woman for telling me that, because I would try to stifle my tears back. Oh, I shouldn't be up here doing that. But healing happened when that goes on, and I know it and I feel good doing it. Like you said, where are you comfortable? I wouldn't believe that I would be comfortable crying and just pouring myself out like that and with them. And so, yeah, it's really cool. You don't have to be spectacular.
Yeah.
As you were talking, the third point that he makes is the need to be, or the temptation to be, powerful. So you were talking about, well, I can't go. I don't have it together. I'm not ready to minister. I can't go in weakness. I can't go in, and of course it ties in with spectacular if you want to go back there. But I can't go in weakness, and I'm going to go the other end of the spectrum. If you never go in weakness, they can't relate to you. They don't see the authenticity. Again, I keep coming back to that word.
Absolutely.
That is so powerful. You need to be willing and able to be you in the moment. To me, that's one of the most powerful genuine leadership principles. Now, I'm going to stop, and I use the word genuine leadership. There is leadership, just like I talked about altar call. There is leadership that will produce short-term results. And there is leadership that will produce long-term results. And the two of those are not necessarily the same. In a book called Good to Great, speaking of blank spots, you're shaking your head like you know Jim. Yeah.
I mean,
the last name. Anyway.
Yeah, no, sorry.
At any rate, in that book, he talks about there are and he used the name Lee Iacocca, who was well known back in those days of going in and turning Chrysler around and creating a 5-year turnaround, but it didn't end up being a 20-year turnaround. And there are other industries where there were leaders who would create 20-year turnarounds. And it was always much slower on the front end to create a 20-year turnaround because you have to create a culture if you're going to do that. So the people who were the most powerful long term were not powerful short term on the front end. And many times, if I go in, I can seemingly exercise leadership principles that are creating short-term results and giving me that illusion that, wow, I am in the right place and I'm getting this bump. But that's where I go back to authenticity. Another word that I use a lot is the word authority. At some point, you're going to get hit. And you're going to get hit hard. And you're going to have those days when you feel absolutely weak, absolutely powerless. If you try to be something that you're not, you got a problem. But at the same time, hopefully during those periods, if there's humility, if I'm connected with God, if I'm connected with godly people, if I have it as a practice to draw strength, yeah, I'm going to get hit. Yes, I'm going to have a low day. No, I'm not going to be seemingly powerful. But when people authentically see you walk through those times in a way with openness, in a way with weakness, in a way with transparency, I believe that's more powerful than any of the great leadership principles that a lot of times people try to apply that are more short-term and they don't have the long-term power.
I like the word you use, transparency, because when I began being more authentic that way, I had a lot of people come up to me and say, I don't know why, but I just feel like I want to share this with you. I want to tell you this, and I've never wanted to tell anyone else this. And I think it was because they could sense that I was being authentic, or I would even just begin to say, I really don't feel like being here today. But I have found that in my weakness, the scripture that says, when you are weak, I am strong. See, we like to be strong all the time. You know, our physical, I can do this, I can do this. But really what I'm seeing in my own experience is that when I don't feel like I can show up, God really shows up.
Absolutely.
And you said something about trying to look like Jesus. Well, you can have that so much on your mind. I remember my husband one time, he was in a conversation with a bunch of leaders and they were talking about that. He goes, but I'm not Jesus. You know, we want to look like him. And we all know the scripture where he's changing us, transforming us. So I think we have this idea that, you know, we're just going to walk around and all be Jesus, you know, and it doesn't happen. It doesn't. Maybe we each have a little part of him, you know, and our part in the body, but we all aren't the full body of Jesus, you know. I don't want to be crucified, by the way.
Amen.
So, you know, getting that realization too, I think is really important.
Priscilla, you know, it's a bad day when you're getting ready to preach and you're like, I don't want to be here today. I'm not ready for this. I'm not up to this. That's not a good day.
No.
I mean, if you're going to have your bad day, you don't want it to be on a day when you're in front of people and you're supposed to speak, right?
No, you don't. But it happens.
It does happen.
It does happen because you just wake up on the wrong side of the bed and it's just what it's going to be.
Well, I think you've even shared previously that, you know, you're used to talking and leading and everything. And I think it might have been a couple months ago that you said you were leading something and then at the end it just kind of went blank, or, you know, or what do I do now? And so I think there can be that stillness, you know, and you go, okay, God, you know.
The last retreat that we did, there was a space in the morning time that I did not feel a freedom to go ahead. And again, I'm quite capable of talking on various topics, but I really felt a check from God saying, no, don't go there. So then I kind of systematically walked through, well, then we'll do this. Well, then we'll do this. Well, then we'll do this. And it primarily ended up being a time of kind of waiting on God. But typically when I do that, there's a resolution. There's this is what was happening. This is why that happened. Well, we had an extended period of time. And this is retreat. You're supposed to be on fire. It's supposed to be good, you know. I mean, I've got to be spectacular and powerful, you know.
Go.
And I'm kind of up there, and it's kind of like, don't know what's happening, don't know why we're here, don't have the freedom to move forward. okay, I guess you're all in this together with me. And it was, unlike most of those experiences that we've had, and most of the time in the retreats, there was a period there that just ended up being a blank spot, so to speak, that I didn't have an explanation for. And again, you can't go wrong by taking some extra time to worship and pray and kind of slow down and et cetera. So, whatever, we did what we did. But normally after I come out of that time, there's a clear sense of, okay, this is what God was doing. This is why you needed to do that. And I didn't get any of that. So it's like, we're hour and a half later, and I'm kind of like, I don't have any explanation, don't know what just went on, don't know why it went on, but oh well, I guess we'll move forward from here.
I'm thinking of a story that one of my friends told me, and the word I'm hearing is that if you're right on your A game and trying to be spectacular, that people can tend to put leaders or people on a pedestal and think that they never have these moments or these times, and they start to kind of maybe possibly admire that person, and they don't understand that we all do have weaknesses. We have times. If we're not being real about all that, it's very phony. And it can make other people that possibly you're trying to lead feel like they're not good enough. I can't do all the qualities. I think there is a leadership quality in letting people see your failures too. I think it's very important because they can just think, oh, you've never had a problem in your day,
What was neat the following day was I can't call it anything but revelation. I mean, I started teaching on stuff that was, again, just incredibly powerful, and a number of people who were there, it really spoke directly to them, etc. And I have to wonder, okay, did that come out of the previous day? Did that come out of the time of waiting on God and crying out to Him? And I still don't know. But that's part of it, whether it's spectacular or powerful or relevant. I mean, the terms that we've brought, being able to put those three down. I love those points that he brought, being able to put those down and be yourself and rest in you, and know that if you have something relevant to bring, God will prompt you at the right time, the right way, and hopefully not be uptight about it.
Yeah, well, and I hear two things from that. The one thing that people don't like, silence. And that silence is okay. It's okay to be in quiet. It's okay, even whether there's like music or not. Like, silence and just listening is an okay place to be, and that doesn't make you better or worse off than anyone. Like, it actually might make you better. Like, it's okay to sit in not knowing. And that's an anxiety thing. Like, I know for me, I hate having to sit in the silence. Like, my husband could tell you how many times I'm anxiously pacing around the house because I want to do something and I can't not do it. Like, I can't sit still. And I'll also say that I just recently 6 months, got diagnosed with ADHD. So then finding the words and the places that those things belong, I really don't like to sit still. And I'm not necessarily in a place where, like, I can't sit still. Like, this obviously can be harder sometimes for people than others, but it's okay. It's okay to be bored. It's okay to not know exactly what your next step is. But then also in the place of when you look at your leaders and you're wanting to be vulnerable, you're wanting to be transparent, and you're okay with them seeing maybe not even just your failures, but your weaknesses. If I'm not that strong of a leader in whatever area, that's okay. And that's maybe because you're not supposed to be the one to take the person to that next step. That's another part of being a leader, is humbling yourself and saying, this isn't my area, but I know that this person, this is their strong suit. So they're going to take you to that next step. I'm just here for this part. And being okay with that is actually really hard, because as the leader, as the person who's investing in someone, you want to do all the pieces. You want to see all of it come through. When a lot of times, even when we get to share the gospel and we're planting that seed, we may never see them in where they end up going and how that relationship grows. We got to be a part of the seeding and planting that, and that's awesome. But it's then recognizing, like, yes, it may look like a weakness, but really it's a strength to be able to say, okay, I did this part. This is where God put me. This is the strength he gave me. And I know that someone else with a different strength than me is going to take them to that next level that I just could never take them to.
Well, let's go back and review. Talk to us about the Global Leadership Summit. Tell our listeners what you want them to hear.
All right, Global Leadership Summit, August 3rd and 4th, will be hosted at Revolution Free Methodist Church here in McPherson. And it really is just for anybody who's willing, anybody who works with people. So that's just about everybody, right? Even as a student, wherever you're at, you can lead where you are. That's their biggest and my biggest message. You can lead wherever you are. We'll be hosting that August 3rd and 4th here in McPherson. And for most information, you can go to revolutionfmc.com/events, which you'll also find all our contact information if there's any questions that you have.
Put you on the spot one more time.
Of course, I love it.
If you, as you think about the summit or something else, if you want to go to something else, what's the leadership principle that you would lay out for people? And if you need a minute, I'll jump to Kimberly and have her solve for a moment. But if you were to say, wow, this is one that really hit me hard and has made a difference in my life, what would you say?
I had to learn how to follow first. And for me, and my personal decision was following Jesus. And I have to have that solid person and relationship and leader in my life before I've ever been able to really lead from where I'm at, is knowing who I'm following, so that I know why I want to lead in the first place and where I want to lead people to, which is Jesus.
Well, good.
Amen. I love that.
Was that like take a deep breath and see how I handle it, or
Yep.
were you good there? Right?
That was good.
Put you on the spot. Kimberly, last thoughts?
Oh my, I'm excited, One question I did want to ask, is it mainly listening and taking notes, or is there interactive things during these conferences, or is it mainly just listening and taking notes and taking
It's a lot of listening and taking notes, but there's breaks and spaces that I will purposely then create okay, we're on a break, so we're going to, stand up, or we're going to do this or that to engage with what we just talked about, but still for those who need to learn a little differently or need space to even just talk about it, there's plenty of that as well.
Yes.
And there's food. I should also say that. Lunches are provided for both days.
Okay.
And snacks galore for the whole time. So, for someone who needs a little something to keep them awake or whatever.
That's what I was wondering also.
There's always that.
Okay. That's awesome. And that's included with the price.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, it's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank
this
you
is,
for
this is a lot of fun.
jumping in. And as I talked about, thank you for helping out with retreat and different things that you've been a part of our ministry before you were here today.
Actually, if you don't mind, I do want to say thank you to you for the ministry that you do here in McPherson and the people that you've really gotten to minister to. I've loved seeing the second hand, really. So the people you have been in relationship with and invested in, who've then decided to come to Revolution, I can say that even our culture has shifted a little bit, and in a good way. The people who have been changed, the people who are wanting to make a difference, who have walked into Revolution and okay, let's do it. And they've really given us permission and reminded us what it looks like to lead where we are. It's given us permission to worship however we need to worship, and really just blessed by the ability to see that full circle of when a life is changed and Jesus is involved. There's such a beauty. And so just thank you for being willing to be a part of that and starting that.
It is fun working with people who have come from a broken background because there's a passion, there's a fire there. And
absolutely,
when they get that taste and hopefully as they carry that fire, that churches need that. Mm-hmm. Years ago, there's a verse that is actually talking about something completely different, so I'm taking it out of context, but it's where there is no wood, the fire goes out. And I can remember that it's like, frankly, wood to a church is new believers. If there's no new believers, if I'm not sowing into new life, if I'm not pouring out, that fire begins to go out in a church. And so we need to be reaching people. And as we're reaching people, guess what? It gets messy. There's problems. A lot of times churches don't want messy. They don't want problems. And so then that becomes at any rate, that's back to leadership. You know, there are churches who their leadership will say, no, we want a clean presentation. We want this look. We want this feel. And no, you have to be willing to deal with the messes and deal with people in infancy and watch it grow through.
Yeah.
So, well, again, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Kimberly, thank you for joining
You're
us.
welcome.
And it's great to have you along for the ride as well. I hope that you've heard some of these principles of leadership and you really come back to that place of authenticity. If there's one word I would emphasize coming out of the day, just learn to be you. Learn to be you in a way that impacts the lives of the people around you. And whether you have a title or not, that is leadership. And many times we do make leadership about titles and positions and, oh, I'm doing this or I'm doing that or I'm having this influence or that influence. Put all those away. Learn to hear the voice of Jesus. Be who he called you to be. Grow up in that. Mature. Learn the leadership principles. I'm big on that. There's communication techniques that are incredibly powerful. Learn them. Don't make foolish mistakes that turn people off. All of those principles are incredibly valuable, but not as valuable as Christ in you, the hope of glory. So get a hold of that, and we will see you at the new time on Friday at 12:30, and look forward to connecting with you then.